Oh, hello? That was weird. I went to click yes, confirm, understand, recording in progress, and it took me off the screen for a moment. But anyway, now I can see you. We're back.
I didn't notice anything. I just noticed you going, oh.
Yeah, I think it was all on my end. It was just suddenly I couldn't. It was like, what's going on? But
Basically, it's episode 3 of It's Giving Camp. And the movie we're covering is Gremlins 2. One of my all-time favorites.
Of movies ever?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, there isn't really any film like it. And I do have fond memories of the first time we watched it together, and so it's nice that we get to revisit it for the podcast. Though I swear my memory was that there was actual a Susan Sontag quote, not just a mention of her.
Yeah, I think every time I've watched it, I like jump at the Susan Sontag mention, but for some reason I keep forgetting that it's there.
Oh.
Which it just reminded me of a while ago today. I started watching this like compilation of Trixie and Katya repeating stories for 2 hours.
Uh-huh. And do they mention Susan Sontag as well?
No, it's just that they consistently forget the stories and also like respond to the stories in the same way over and over.
Honestly, me too. I'm sure I've done that before. Though that is kind of one of my like fears, is I'm always like worried that I've like, because I've had moments where like, like I once had a friend recommend a book series to me, and then I read it, like not immediately, but I did eventually read it and I really liked it, and then I recommended the series back to them because I forgot that they had recommended it to me in the first place, and like that embarrassment is seared into my brain, and so I'm always worried that like I'm gonna like repeat something that the other person already like has heard, and it's gonna be really embarrassing, or like I'm gonna repeat a story that they even told me in the first place. But
with Trixie and Katya is not even like repeating a story back to a person. It's like own personal stories being told over and over.
Well, and also the thing that I was going to say was that they always seem to forget that the story has been told before. So, who knows? But that's how you feel about watching Gremlins 2, is that you're
like the Susan Sontag mention of it. Like I always forget that it's there, and every time I watch this movie, I jump when I hear it, but then I just wipe it from my memory.
How could you? It's one of the best moments.
I know. Well, how should we start?
How should we
talking
start
about this movie?
Well, maybe we should first give a very brief summary of what Gremlins is about, and then give a summary of what Gremlins 2 is about.
Yeah, so the first one is pretty simple. It's basically this boy, Billy, he gets Gizmo for Christmas from his dad, and Gizmo is a mogwai. He's like this little furry creature. And basically, in a series of events, the rules are disobeyed, which are don't get Gizmo wet and don't feed him after midnight,
Yes.
which then causes the Gremlins to come out and they almost destroy the small town. That's basically the first one.
And it's technically a Christmas movie.
Yeah.
Fun little story. I first watched Gremlins in it was either early in high school or I don't know, when I was a teenager with my one of my best friends. And in July, we were gonna do a Christmas in July day. We were like, we're gonna give each other little gifts and we're gonna like have hot chocolate and we'll watch a Christmas movie. And the Christmas movie we ended up picking out was Gremlins because neither of us had seen it. And we were younger than high school because I remember I stayed the night and she got freaked out that night when her dog ran into the room because she was like, it's a gremlin. Yeah, so Gremlins 2 is the same characters, Billy and oh, there's also Kate,
Yeah.
his girlfriend.
Girlfriend.
Were they dating in the first one?
I don't remember. But it's also like been 6 years since the first one.
Yeah, and so the second one, they're in New York. Everything
they're in the workforce.
Yes, everything is scaled up, and they're in this this big building that's a smart building.
Yeah. It's also kind of a death trap.
Yeah. From the beginning, this is a film that is it feels like it's making fun of modernization and automation.
I wouldn't necessarily say modernization itself, but rather I feel like specifically consumerism and late stage capitalism.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was also like to me, I found this bit where the one kind of guy who works for Mr. Clamp, who's like the CEO, when he comes by the office and he's like, "Why do you have this plant? Why do you have this decoration up when we pay for all this nice art?" And I don't know, there's like something about like this like it's I guess it's not modernism, but like corporate, what's the word I'm looking for when everything is kind of like everyone's made the same, like
it's like very streamlined.
Yeah, and like being like uniform and yeah, I mean like everything's uniform. They all have to, things, everything has to be authorized, and they also have to follow rules in some ways similar to the Gremlins having to follow like these archaic strange rules. It's also like everyone in this office building has to like follow these kind of bizarre rules, like you can't have plants at your desk. And
like at some point, like one of the voices from the speaker is like, for whoever owns so and so this model of car, please move it, it's ugly.
it's they say it's old and dirty.
Yeah.
The announcements, over the overhead announcements, are my favorite reoccurring bit about the film. There's a joke that Mr. Clamp doesn't like, he doesn't like black and white, he only likes things in color. And there's an announcement that's like, on the Classics Movie Channel, we're showing Casablanca now in color with a happier ending.
Yeah, and that's like it's a direct reference to Ted Turner, because Mr. Clamp is like an amalgam of 90s, late 80s Trump and also Ted Turner, who apparently like did air like really colorized versions of movies, which I think one of them was Casablanca.
Oh, that is upsetting.
But like that line specifically is very much, to me, reads as like about how corporations like just seek to sanitize art.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, oh my god, there's so much to get into with that comment. Like given the fact that maybe this is getting ahead of ourselves, but like the meta commentary within the film about people's critiques of Gremlins, like one of the channels in this like media conglomerate that is Mr. Clamp's business, or the Clamp Industries or whatever, there is a like talk show review thing called the Movie Police.
And the critic is an actual film critic
Oh, I didn't know that.
who did actually pan the first Gremlins movie.
That's so fun. Because, I mean, yeah, they have this critic being like reviewing Gremlins within the context of Gremlins 2. He's reviewing Gremlins and saying how horrible it is. And then a bunch of gremlins attack him. It's just, and also the fact that you also have this scene where, Billy's trying to be like, the gremlins are, oh yeah, because we haven't said yet, the gremlins happen again. The Gizmo.
Yeah, of course they do. And they're happening in this smart building death trap.
Yeah. So Billy is trying to tell these people, like, hey, there's a problem. You can't, they don't like sunlight. You can't eat after midnight. And these people are like, what? This is ridiculous. And like talking about
they try to cinema sins it.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, this, they're like, what? Well, what about if they're on a plane and they go between time zones? What if they get a bit of seed stuck in their teeth? They're absolutely nitpicking it. And the response that the movie gives to those characters is a gremlin jumping out and attacking those people.
Yeah.
And so it's that to me is like the most camp aspect of this film.
Yeah, and I feel like it's very integral to how this film was conceived of in the first place. I feel like the background information is really important, which like
yeah, get into that.
Basically the first Gremlins was really successful, therefore of course Warner Brothers wanted to do a sequel of it, and they were like shopping it around various directors and screenwriters, but like none of the ideas really stuck. So they like went back to Joe Dante, the writer director of the first one, and Joe for years like did not want to make a sequel of Gremlins. He's like, it's this, the story's over, this doesn't need another one. But like when they came to him, he was like, okay, but only in the condition that I get total complete creative freedom and triple the budget that the original had.
And he put that budget to good use.
Yeah. Like I was watching the dead meat kill count for this movie, and basically the building is kind of an actual functional building.
Oh, like they actually,
like it's just like various floors. It's of course like not the 40 something floors in the movie, but like it's actual various functioning floors with like a functioning elevator. And
wow. I also just think like the number of strange celebrity cameos that they get, and like all of the special effects.
Christopher Lee.
Oh yeah. Which which one? Wait, which one?
He's the scientist.
Oh yeah.
Which yeah. I feel like it's like a perfect role for him, because the scientist is like a classic B movie trope, and he was in a lot of Hammer horror movies, which is like, yeah, of course Christopher Lee's playing the scientist working on like a bunch of experiments within this corporation.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then speaking of those experiments, you've got all these, you basically then get a bunch of like incredibly strange, bizarre, genetically modified gremlins out of this lab, including, so we have this continuation of these amazing practical special effects, and you also have an electricity gremlin.
Yeah, I really like him
electricity
because he's
gremlin.
like 2D animated.
Yeah, and it looks so good. It looks so much fun. Because this is a film that, was like, is it 89?
It was made in 89, released in 90.
It still looks so good. Because,
Yeah.
like, there is, like, I don't think there's any, like, there's not any, like, really any computer generated stuff in it.
The Bat Gremlin, a bit. Different sections of him are CG. But I feel like
It
that's
also kind of looked like stop motion to me.
I feel like some CG was involved somewhere in there, but the point
Okay.
is, if there is CG here, it's pretty minimal. I always like go back to this, but a lot of these movies that we've covered, if they have special effects of any kind, they're all very practical, and I keep going to camp as being like this very tactile aesthetic as well.
Yeah.
So I always keep going like I I want to grab this movie. Like you can just feel the movie.
I wonder, like, if this is a chicken and the egg situation where it's not necessarily that, like, oh, it's camp and so we want to make a camp film and so it's in 3D or in, like, not 3D, it's in, people want to make camp films so they do, like, practical effects and stuff. I almost wonder if it's like the opposite, that because there's practical effects, because it looks like so.
I mean, it's both tactile and also the sense of retrograde of it all.
But, like, the fact that it's tactile makes it like, if camp is all about, like, digging into the meaning of aesthetics, it's just like it feels more engaging. The aesthetics feel more engaging if they have this, like, tactileness to it. I wonder if it's less that 3D films, or why do I keep saying 3D? CGI films aren't. I don't know. I guess it really depends on the CGI. Because also,
Yeah.
like,
Because a lot of CGI does look really good, and a lot of it can look bad.
a lot of it can look bad. I think it also maybe it just comes from the fact that can you feel the love? Can you feel the energy, the investment? Because, like, a Marvel film with just, like, everything is green screened, it doesn't feel
like not just green screen, but also overworked computer animation staff.
yeah, and, like, it's color graded weird. That doesn't feel like.
And also, did you see that the Secret Invasion opening intro is AI?
Oh, yes, I did, and I don't want to think about that because it just, like, it's
So
that's just,
why?
they don't care.
Especially
They don't.
after the
It's like
release of Across the Spider-Verse. It's like especially embarrassing after that.
yeah,
But anyways,
yeah. Because that's another thing, I guess, with like Across the Spider Verse and, like, animated films. Like, it's like it's not like it's three. It's like it's not like it's this prosthetics, live action practical effects, but you can still feel the life in it. You can feel, like, the craft. I guess that's the thing, is that aesthetics that you can tell that someone had to make it and a computer didn't make it. Like, obviously humans make computer, generated stuff, but, like, the work, I don't know. I'm totally
yeah.
rambling. I don't know if I'm making any sense.
Basically the practical work on this film is excellent. And one of the Instagram accounts that I think both I and the pod follow is a Instagram like documenting the preservation and general restoration of the various gremlins in this film.
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't know about this account.
Yeah. There are like various Gremlins 2-centered accounts that have popped up over the years, one of which is sadly no longer active, which I want to touch on later.
I am definitely like, there's so much more that I want to talk about.
This film is such a rich text.
Yeah. There, like, for me, I kind of was like, okay, there's a couple of things that, like, for me pop out as main themes. Like, the critique of corporate America, for sure. And then, like, the meta commentary about Gremlins, the movie, and the creatures. And then there's an intersection between those two things with, like, the ending and, like, the talks of, like, how Gizmo is perfect for merchandising.
I do have Gizmo merch.
Wait, do you have Gizmo merch?
Like back home, I have like a little stuffed Gizmo and a little Gizmo figurine.
That is so cute.
Because I love him. I love
so
him.
Cute.
His design in this movie is way better than his design in the first one.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And he has much more articulation in this one as well.
My one critique of this film, there's not enough Gizmo. There's not enough Gizmo.
He's busy being tortured and training to kill the Gremlins.
Like his little talking and his little.
But like, I feel like that's the point.
He's so cute.
I feel like that's the point. This film doesn't want to show you a lot of his cuteness. It wants to torture him.
Yeah, it is kind of. I mean, it's indulging in the grotesque in many ways. Also, the evolution in the the Gremlins going to the movie theater scenes in this film versus the original Gremlins is so interesting to me. If we're talking about things, this film being kind of like a more like, darker isn't the right word, but like risque.
It's also not as simple as the first one.
Yeah.
Just tell us where you saw the things.
Don't patronize me, young man. They're real. I saw them.
I know, I've seen them too, but where?
In my laboratory. Spice of life.
Stupid name, I know, but
It wasn't my own.
Than the first one.
We just show these movies, madam. We don't make them.
I quit. Call the union, call the National Guard. Those things have taken over the projector. They refuse to show the rest of the film. All they want to see is Snow White, the Seven Dwarfs.
Enough! I'll take care of this.
We have Gremlins in the projection booth. Could you help us? Gremlins? In this theater? Now? Okay, you guys, listen up. People pay good money to see this movie. When they go out to a theater, they want cold sodas, hot popcorn, and no monsters in the projection booth. Do I have to come up there myself? Do you think the Grimsters can stand up to the Hulkster? Well, if I were you, I'd run the rest of Gremlins too, right now. Sorry, folks. It won't happen again.
Well, I was gonna say there's this moment in the film when it seems like the film has like cut out and like the actual like film is being burnt away, and then like the Gremlins do this little like shadow puppetry, and then they start playing vintage porn.
Yeah, that's so fun.
Like, And then, because in the first
And then
film,
there's
it was-
like a mother and a kid walking out and going like, this is worse than the first one.
yeah. And then Hulk Hogan shows up and is like, Gremlins, you better put back on Gremlin 2.
So real for that.
It seems like a non sequitur, but then like absolutely fits in with the tone of the film.
Because it's about destroying things.
But also, don't you think it's kind of fun and like it's definitely more camp that in the first film the Gremlins were watching Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and it's like, oh, this sweet little kids movie, and then this film they're like boobies, 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 boobies.
Which just makes them kind of harder to merchandise.
Yeah.
The main goal of this movie is to just destroy the reputation of the first one and also destroy Warner Brothers as a whole. Because there's a lot of like what Warner Brothers and Warner Brothers property references and Easter eggs that are that kind of at first glance seem like regular Easter eggs that we're so used to nowadays, but the tone and the context in which they're in, it's very much in a mocking tone.
Oh, absolutely.
And like very, you just gave us the money to do this. Look how dumb you are.
Well, there's the Gremlins that has the Warner Brothers logo painted on him.
I think it's fully tattooed on him.
Oh yeah. There's the is Wizard of Oz Warner Brothers? Or is that just a media
I
media
think that
reference they have?
might just be a media. I'm pretty sure it was MGM, maybe.
Well, what about Batman?
That's Warner Brothers.
Yeah, because then when the Bat Gremlin crashes through the wall to start flying around the city, it leaves a perfect Batman logo shaped hole in the wall. And we have the opening title sequence and the closing title sequence, the classic Warner Brothers cartoon, the
Looney
Bugs Bunny,
Tunes.
Looney Tunes. Yeah, and that is completely original to this film, where Daffy Duck tries to take over and gets beat up by the Warner Brothers Shield logo.
Which it's thematically relevant to the ethos of this film.
Yeah. It's like it sets up from the very beginning that I don't know, I mean it's kind of breaking the artifice. Like it's breaking the foundations of the way you think this film should go from the beginning. It's like, nope, change your expectations. Things are not going to go the way they normally go. Like literally there's this sequence where like it seems like the film reel is literally like burning and breaking apart. It's literally like we are destroying and reconstructing this film. Like the Gremlins and their chaos in some ways, do you think like are representations of
They're
the
absolutely
writer-director?
representations, and I do feel like we're supposed to be on the Gremlins side, at least in this movie.
Well, yeah, because they also made them really cool and fun.
Yeah, I like the Gremlins as a whole are very representative of the camp of this film. Like, for example, they love little outfits. They're always wearing little outfits and whatever it is that they're making a mockery of or an imitation of, they always put on the outfit to emphasize. I just keep going back to when a few of them are at this desk and they're wearing the like Wall Street outfits and they're going buy, sell.
Well, yeah, because that's another, like, the Gremlins are absolutely being used to critique corporate, this corporation and this idea of sales and stock, and it's like it's all silly. They're playing pretend.
Also, this film establishes from the very beginning that the corporation is pretty bad. Like, it starts off them gentrifying Chinatown and just completely
Yeah.
belittling Mr. Wang. And Mr. Wang clearly has, like, his sickness is clearly being exacerbated by the construction all around him, so he's kind of killed by gentrification.
Yeah. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but it's true. Also, I mean, before we even see Mr. Is it Mr. Or,
It's Mr. Wang.
no. The assistant to Mr. Clamp. Before we even see his face, the way we get introduced to him is his foot stepping out of the car, and you like see him hovering. He steps over the trash.
Oh yeah.
Very much looking down upon, I guess, the city. And I mean, in Mr. Clamp's office is like seems to be on the highest floor. Out the windows, it looks like clouds. Like he literally can't is like so above everyone else, so out of touch. I also love the bit that when the Gremlins have taken over and they're, destroying all these channels and stuff, Mr. Clamp is like, I never thought that I would have to play this. And he puts in a VHS that says that
Oh, I wrote there's just something about apocalypse broadcasts that are very camp to me, but also really scary.
Well,
which kind of adds to the camp
it's just
of these types of
it's
broadcasts.
so to me, I read this as this guy is like, oh, the only reason that my channels would have gone off the air is because it's the end of civilization. Which I guess in some ways it kind of is because of the Gremlins, but like it's so like this man's ego is bigger than the moon. And Billy does play into that. He's like, oh, you can help save the city if you just, do this thing.
I found a lot of gender stuff, but I want to get into that later.
Oh,
because there's a lot of gender stuff with this movie.
Oh my god, I'd love to talk about
But
it.
like with the overall how we've been talking about the violence and mockery of the Gremlins, and this article from Mel magazine, I think this is from their interview with the Institute of Gremlins 2 Studies, which is the Twitter account that is no longer operating, which is very disappointing to me.
Is there a reason why it's no longer operating?
I don't remember, but it's been like more than a year since I've seen a tweet from them. But basically, in this excerpt, the Gremlins are hedonistic, but not the kind of enlightened hedonism that is so prevalent today. They drink, they smoke, they engorge themselves on food, they put themselves in suicidally dangerous situations. Maybe the combination of ancestral memory and rapid reproductive capacity means that they don't value their lives the same way we do. Or maybe, due to their short lifespans, all of life's pleasures are completely novel to them. But if there's one thing that can be said, it's that they take pleasure not in wanting, but in doing and being. In this Slice of Life lab, the Gremlins physically transform themselves into a number of mutated forms, for no reason apart from their own curiosity and pleasure. They don't hesitate. They aren't paralyzed by fear of choice. They just grab a vial of experimental genetic material and guzzle it down like it's a cold beer. And yeah, they basically spend the whole movie just doing anything.
Yeah.
Like, the entire movie is basically them destroying this building.
That reminds me of the scene where the brain goblin is that
Gremlin.
That's how he's commonly referred to, right?
The brain gremlin.
Yeah, the brain. Oh, did I say goblin? I mean,
yes.
Yeah. So, okay. That reminds me of the scene where the brain gremlin is on the talk show, the one channel that has still been able to keep running.
An impromptu talk show hosted by this actor, Fred, who's usually playing Dracula in the clamp network, but since he's the only person with like reporting education on the inside, he decides to just report as is.
Yeah, also another side note, the person he's grabbed to be his camera operator is played by the same actor who played Duncan in Vamp.
Yeah, Getty Watanabe.
As you probably know, an entire race of strange little beings has invaded the Clamp Center building. And in an even more bizarre twist, one of the creatures... Is that accurate? That one of these creatures is somehow able to talk, and he's going to talk with us right now. I think the main question that people have is, creature, what is it that you want?
Fred, what we want is, I think, what everyone wants, and what you and your viewers have. Civilization.
Yes, but what sort of civilization are you speaking of, creature?
The niceties, Fred, the fine points. Diplomacy, compassion, standards, manners, tradition. That's what we're reaching toward. Oh, we may stumble along the way, but civilization, yes. The Geneva Convention, chamber music, Susan Sontag. Everything your society has worked so hard to accomplish over the centuries, that's what we aspire to. We want to be civilized. I mean, you take a look at this fellow here. Now, was that civilized? No, clearly not. Fun, but in no sense civilized. Now, bear in mind, none of us has been in New York before. There are the Broadway shows. We'll have to find out how to get tickets. There's also a lot of street crime, but I believe we can watch that for free. We want the essentials. Dinettes, complete bedroom groups, convenient credit, even if we've been turned down in the past.
But anyway, when he's interviewing Brain Gremlin and asking what does he want, he talks about how they just want civilization. And that's in that little monologue that he gives is when he mentions Susan Sontag as, I guess, one of the representations of what we as society have achieved. It's like, it was like the Geneva Conventions, something about orchestra or like chorus, and then Susan Sontag. What I love about that sequence is that, you know, the Brain Gremlin is going on about how they want diplomacy and compassion and tradition, and while it's the camera is panning over this crowd of gremlins just chattering and drinking and smoking and going, you know, wild. And it's like, I don't know, to me.
And then at one point he randomly grabs a gun and shoots another gremlin.
Well, yeah, that's okay. Then that's the thing, is that to me it's like this commentary on civilization and human society, where it's like, oh, human societies they're all respectable, but the gremlins are like this representation of us at the most extreme, at the most, like, you know, I don't use Freud often, but the id, you know, I love that juxtaposition. And also, like you said, like there's this one gremlin that pops up and is like, ah, you know, and the brain gremlin shoots him and is like, see, you know, he's like, see, that was not civilized. And to me, I'm like, oh, there's this like almost like a little mini commentary on like pulling a gun on someone is also not civilized, but like there is.
But it arose from civilization.
Yeah, and also this is like, that is a true critique of America, that like, oh, we saw like issues are solved with violence, and that is like, it's justified. And I'm not gonna say that it's like the most like thought out and nuanced perspective on gun control, but it is a little kind of moment that I think is interesting.
Yeah, I feel like the general violence of the gremlins is camp, especially juxtaposed with Gizmo, who is essentially the reason they exist. Like, they all come from him, but he's this very cute creature who seems to want to distance himself from violence, even though he's also a reason for the violence, and violence is also subjected upon him. Like how they keep torturing him, like they tie him to toy train tracks, which I felt was funny.
One of their forms of torture is like using Velcro to like rip his fur off.
Yeah, and they also made copies of him with a copy machine.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of moments that are very like the violence of an office space.
True,
Which we can go into later, but basically Gizmo is really fascinating in that sense of being this very cute, soft, precious creature that can be very easily commercialized, who is also a progenitor of violence, and violence is forced upon him as well.
You know what also what's interesting is that like yes, like violence comes from Gizmo in the forms of these gremlins that are kind of a result of weird body horror and exploding from his back. But when he indulges isn't the right word. I guess like participates in violence. He learns violence. It's from movies. It's from
Rambo.
media. Exactly.
Specifically Rambo. And he uses it against his own kind.
But to me, that indicates not that Gizmo himself is inherently violent. It's that like media teaches him to be violent, and then the gremlins are inherently violent. But Gizmo, to me, Gizmo's never shown to be inherently violent, even though violence comes from him.
I wouldn't necessarily say that there's an inherent violence to him, maybe, but that it is very much, in some way, shape, or form, it does come out of him in a certain way.
Yeah. But he doesn't act that way. He only acts that way when he's inspired by media. To me, that I don't know, as much as I think that like,
and there's also the very real risk that he might eat something after midnight. That's all it takes.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm just like thinking about the fact like one of the reasons this film is such a rich text is that even though I just went how we could use Gremlins as like a mirror to our own society, you could also argue that Gizmo is also a mirror, and that he learns violence from watching Rambo, and that, you know, maybe that's another way to read the way humans are. I definitely think multiple points could be argued from, and many interpretations could be drawn from this film.
One can very easily spend an hour talking about specific scenes. Like, that's how crazy this movie is.
I wanted to briefly bring up the Key and Peele sketch, the Gremlins 2 pitch meeting.
Oh, yeah.
I watched it right after I watched the film, because I couldn't remember what exactly the tone of that sketch was, and I wanted to rewatch it because the film Gremlins 2 itself is like critiquing people's critiques of Gremlins and Gremlins 2. Like, that is,
it's also critiquing sequels as a whole and the expectations of a sequel.
I was curious. I was like, oh, was that sketch like,
did it know? Does he know?
Does it understand the film, that it's kind of, it's supposed to be silly?
Does he know?
And watching that film, or watching the sketch, I think it does. Like, it was really fun to rewatch that sketch because it is filled with a lot of joy in many ways. Like, yes, it's the whole premise is that like, you know, Jordan Peele is playing this character that is like, oh, I'm the sequel doctor. I come in and like give sequels a twist, and is like definitely parodying and joking about how ridiculous sequels get. But it also is like, oh, you come up, what's a fun concept? Everyone come up with a gremlin. Come up with a fun new gremlin. And it like,
I feel like that was exactly Joe Dante's process.
Yeah, and it
come up with a little guy.
I like that sketch because it isn't trying to like, it's not cinema sensing it. You know, it's not being like, well, why would that be in there? It's just kind of like, nope, all of that's in there. Isn't that silly and fun? And it's not really even trying to like, if it's making if it's questioning anything, it's not really questioning the writers of Gremlins 2. It's maybe questioning the very concept of needing to produce a sequel in the first place.
Which is what the film is doing.
Exactly. Did you want to get into gender?
Yeah. I'm like more fascinated by the destruction stuff, but we should get into the gender stuff. This one's from thegailydreadful.com, and I took a bunch of various screenshots from all my sources. In this paragraph, it says, "It is not until the gremlins are fed after midnight, the witching hour, that their transition into a more monstrous other allows them to fully come into their own. The creatures begin experimenting with a highly human determined idea of gender expression by disrupting its limits. The artifice and excess of the gender binary become palpable through their exaggerated masquerade." In her 1964 essay Notes on Camp by Susan Sontag, who is name dropped in the movie, argues that the androgen is one of the great images of camp sensibility, with drag in particular affirming her idea of being as playing a role. Sontag argues that camp epitomizes the metaphor of life as theater, which is an idea both Gremlins and Gremlins 2 explore in notably Brechtian ways, but also more generally through their interpretation of gender as performance. And it goes into talking about Marla Bloodstone, who I love.
Oh.
We need to talk about Marla.
Yes. See, I was so ready to start talking about the girl gremlin and like also maybe the ideas about like reproduction that the gremlins question. But let's talk about Marla first.
She's just such an exaggeration of various 80s tropes and ways and various modes of 80s womanhood. Like
she feels like a very like New York character too.
Yeah, she's a very strong New York accent and she's smoking all the time. But she also has the big hair and the red lipstick and red nails.
Yes.
But also the big power suit and the shoulder pads.
Yes.
And she's very much embodying a kind of simultaneous masculinity and femininity.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's also like that simultaneous masculinity and femininity also is challenged in kind of like her role in this office building in many ways, where yes, you know, it's the 80s, like there's been women's liberation movements and stuff, but she's a working woman. She's not the boss, but the boss of
she's Billy's boss.
Yeah, she's
Billy's boss specifically.
She's in a position of power, but also she is very feminine in the way she flirts with Billy and the way then later she is like flirting and interested in Mr. Clamp. And like, yes, she doesn't seem to be like, she is using that to pursue her role in the in positions of power within the company, but also like there is definitely like, yeah, there's this like sexuality and this like romance with her in the way like she's also like a really, I don't know, it's just really interesting to me that she's got both of those aspects of like she's not just shown to like have gotten her position because of her femininity, she also is like constantly working. You know, she's always worrying about these deadlines and stuff. The reason she gets trapped in the spider gremlin's web is because she was still working during all of the chaos. She comes down and she's like, my light's gone off, you know? So that to me is, I think, is also really interesting, and is like that there is almost like a contradictory gender roles in her character.
Yeah, I also just love her. She's the best human character in this movie.
I'm partial to Kate. I think Kate is really funny.
Kate is also really good, which I feel like she's kind of a meta narrative camp sort of character.
Absolutely. Because the thing with Gremlins,
not just with the Lincoln monologue,
Yeah.
but also mainly in the casting of Phoebe Cates, who in the 80s she was very much a sex symbol and like one of the actresses for the sex comedies. You know, the Fast Times in Richmond High, the red bikini scene.
Oh, I've never seen that film.
Slow-mo.
I didn't know that was her.
But you've absolutely seen the clip of like the red bikini fantasy sequence.
Yeah, probably.
If not, I'll send it to you. That's her.
Okay.
That's her. And Kate is very much an opposite kind of character to that. She's very prim and proper and very girl next door. And a lot of the movie is her just waiting for Billy to propose to her.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I really like the Abe Lincoln monologue. I really like the fact that Gremlins, the first Gremlins, is like this beloved movie that also like so many parts just don't make sense. And like I would argue that Gremlins itself is camp in many of those ways.
Yeah.
But Gremlins 2 is everything turned up
even
to
more
11.
so.
Yeah. And it's like, I mean, I wrote down that Gremlins 2 feels like a movie that's both making fun of Gremlins and making fun of people who made fun of Gremlins.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know, in Gremlins, Kate goes on this whole monologue about how she hates Christmas because her dad died on Christmas. And then so in this film, she starts going on a monologue about don't bring up Abe Lincoln because I had this trauma in my childhood. And it's like, this is not the time for that.
I hope she has a trauma related to every single holiday.
It would be, yeah. Yeah, it is really, like, because also in that, it's almost like, that in itself is another, like, tiny critique of like, American consumerism, and how holidays are just get turned into, you know, they're not actually about the celebration of being with family and loved ones and stuff. It's about consumerism, especially with Christmas. But I guess not really President's Day.
Not yet. Not yet.
Hallmark has a card for anything. So, do we want to talk about, if we're talking about gender though, can we also talk about Girl Gremlin?
Yeah, that's what I'm searching for right now. So, it's noted by the founder of the Institute of Gremlins 2 Studies, Greta Gremlin, is the only sexual-centered gremlin, allowing for a certain existential horror to her identity. I would further this idea by claiming a large portion of the delicious horror of Greta is that through her rejection of the film's hegemonic masculinity, a queering against the grain through high femme drag, she reclaims and queers hypersexualized femininity for herself in the same way we are now claiming Gremlins as lesbian horror canon.
I'd never heard that Gremlins described as lesbian horror.
I mean, if viewed through a specific lens of Greta Gremlin and also Kate and Marla,
yeah, that's true. I mean, they're all high femme. Well, Kate isn't high femme, but
the rest are.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really interesting that all of the gremlins that drink these like beakers of strange, you know, genetically modified, you know, liquid potions that genetically modify them, they all have these really oversized labels on them that indicate what they're drinking. And I do think it's really interesting that like the beaker that this girl gremlin, Greta Gremlin, drinks has the female symbols on it. To me, it doesn't even really read as drag to me. It reads as trans. Like,
yeah,
she's on that estrogen.
Yeah, HRT saved her life. Literally,
Yeah.
she does survive the movie.
Yes.
Although one can argue that she is both trans and doing drag.
Yes. Yeah. The exaggerated,
I love
the
her.
big red lips, everything in that
The
that
leopard print
presentation of,
dress, and she's various outfit changes.
yeah. She ends the movie in a bridal dress and veil and bouquet. To me, I mean, another thing that is this kind of like subversion is the fact that she is this very female presenting gremlin that still also has the aggression that so many gremlins do. And this isn't to say, that like this isn't to get into any like weirdness about how people talk about trans women. This is just like she reads to me as like she's very Miss Piggy.
Yeah.
In that like it's less that it's like it's more it's this female character who is definitely a female character who is also like very needy, and that is not always a desirable female characteristic, but that is
She gets to embody so many things.
yeah.
She's violent and she's weird looking, but also gorgeous.
Yeah.
And she also is a bride.
And she's also like the fact that Mr. Forrester, gets locked in this bathroom with her. He seems like he wants to escape, he wants to get help. He's kind of being like she's kind of, forcing herself upon him. But also in the end he's kind of like into it.
Yeah. Also, it's kind of like the vampire conversation we had before. Like, it's just in the nature of gremlins.
Yeah.
To be violent and destructive.
Well, I was gonna say, like, the fact that Mr. Forrester is into her, she's a monster, but also she's desirable.
Yeah, she's Mother. I will say this about so many characters in this season, but she's Mother. Like, genuinely, like, she's a fashion icon to me. Like, for a while I did have her as my profile pic on various social media, and I might do that again.
Yeah, I was thinking, I was like, have we used Gremlins 2 imagery on any Camp Pod promo yet either?
We might have at some point. I'll have to scroll back.
It really, I mean, it truly is like just so many iconic images.
Like, she embodies camp.
Yeah. Also, this film is sometimes really gross.
Yeah.
And I say that as like a compliment.
All of the gremlins are they're so wet.
It's my least
they're wet puppets.
When the gremlins it's kind of horrifying when Gizmo gets these, gremlins popping out of his back.
Like, again, the violence of Gizmo. The reproduction of Mogwai is it looks violent, and it looks like it feels violent.
That also is, it's also, if we're going to talk about like queerness and gender, like that's also really interesting, that it's like you get this little guy who's, Billy like uses he him pronouns for Gizmo,
but they technically don't have gender or even biological sex.
Yeah,
like they just kind of exist.
It's asexual reproduction that is also, but I mean, one could argue that it's a very violent birth, but also there's, a lot of people talk about how human reproduction can be really violent and upsetting.
Which it leads me to another excerpt about Greta. She's not just the only female gremlin, but the only sexual gremlin. There's a certain existential horror to Greta. She has gone from being with the ability to asexually reproduce and therefore is inherently complete, to one whose desires require another for fulfillment. This, one imagines, would be rather traumatic. Of course, her gender is performative, but because there are no other gremlins who share her desires, she must look upon to a human to fulfill and thus adopt certain human behaviors.
Oh, damn. Damn, I did not realize this much could be written about Greta Gremlin. I mean, it's great. I agree with everything.
We've said this a billion times, but this film is a rich text, and one could easily spend hours on specific scenes.
Yeah. I was just gonna say though, if we're talking about gross moments, the way the like weird gremlin birth pours when the gremlins get wet and then they get the weird pussy like things on their back that you can see the little tiny baby gremlins inside.
Oh yeah.
Wet is a good description of that. It is.
Also
It's
really
gross.
good effect.
It's really good effects. That's why I'm saying it's a compliment.
I'm just like, are those puppets within puppets? Like, that's crazy.
I don't know how they did that.
I keep being drawn to the notions of destruction and chaos in this movie.
What are your
just how much this, like, I don't know how to explain it.
Was there a specific scene you're thinking of?
I'm picturing the New York scene. And how basically it's in many ways the climax of the film, in the sense that it's kind of the goal of the film to just completely destroy everything and revel in destruction, and it's a kind of productive destruction where meanwhile the sense of corporatization and sequelness that it's also parodying is kind of a non-productive destruction in a sense. Like,
yeah.
I keep thinking about this Letterboxd review, which the Letterboxd reviews for this movie are really good, and one of them was talking about how one could, now I'm like, was this a tweet, or I know, basically someone on the internet said that this film feels like a key text for an end of history compilation or an end of history piece of work in the like theoretical creation of art end of history.
What do you mean? Wait, what does end of history mean? Like
in
this is like
this is the peak and the end of creativity, specifically creativity under the current conditions of art in general.
Yeah.
And how like through the productive destruction of the Gremlins' actions, it's kind of trying to create a new kind of art, and maybe like a new kind of film, or just something. It's trying to break free from its sequelness.
That's such a good point, because yeah, this is a sequel that is, it's not just trying to, it's not, a sequel that is like, oh, it's, continuing to tell the arc in a beautiful way. It is questioning the very nature of sequels itself. That, yeah, this is like the antidote to the endless Marvel slog or endless reboots.
Yeah, and I've seen people go like, Joe Dante saw the current media landscape coming.
Yeah.
And like, it's almost like this movie is a cry for help.
Yeah, and it was the 90s, early 90s.
Made in 89.
Yeah, this is such a good question of like, this is creativity. This is art under the constraints of corporatism, and it's destroying it from the inside.
At least it's very much trying to do like a productive destruction.
And that is because, like you said, you know, in talking about the history, it's like he was given a huge budget. He was given complete creative control. That kind of, this is also like, if you're thinking about like this in the history of production, it's telling a meta story about how these kinds of stories don't get told in other sequels.
Yeah. Like very much Joe Dante was like, if a Gremlins sequel is going to be made, it needs to be made in this specific way with this specific story.
Damn. And also, you know, something that's kind of like sad but telling is that at the end of the story, Mr. Clamp hasn't really learned anything.
Yeah. The corporation just keeps on going.
Yeah.
And tries to merchandise Gizmo.
Even after saying, he's like, oh, I'm gonna make stuff for people, not things. And I'm gonna, you know, build a new village, but it's a village that's gonna have his name. And he's not actually really caring about.
And it's a village that already exists.
Yeah.
It's Billy's hometown.
And he doesn't care. He doesn't even listen when that's what they say. He's just taking the same visuals, the same design, and he's replicating it under his own name. Damn. And finding a way to make some merchandise in the meantime.
I feel like a really good place to end this is, like, this is a very silly movie, and this also might be a masterpiece, and that's very camp.
Yeah. Well, could we end this discussion by quickly saying a couple of our small little favorite silly bits that we haven't mentioned already? Like, who's your favorite gremlin?
The shredding, like, before I say favorite gremlin, the shredding kill.
Yeah!
Like, one of the gremlins gets shredded in, like, this paper shredding machine.
I have 3. First, I love the Canadian-themed restaurant that Marla and Billy go to. One of those things that just isn't explained at all. The dessert is a giant chocolate mousse head. Second, I love that when Billy is getting bailed out of the police station, there's a bunch of mimes.
Oh, yeah. They're all exiting this police car.
And third and finally, I love that they low-key confirm that Billy is a stoner because he says that they should start their plan at 420.
Oh, yeah! In one moment I was like, is that a 420 joke?
Yeah!
Another thing that I really liked, like little details. The sound effects are very Looney Tunes.
Oh,
like the sound effects are all very cartoony and not aiming to be like what something would realistically sound like.
There's also a Wilhelm scream in there.
Yeah. And all the plants in this building are fake. They're plastic. Billy's is the only plant that's real, and they explicitly tell him to throw it away.
Because it might have an aphid infestation.
And my favorite gremlin is, of course, Greta Gremlin. That's Mother.
My favorite gremlin is Brain Gremlin.
He's a close second.
It's an amazing rendition of New York, truly. But if I had to pick a gremlin who's just like you see one time, that is also really fun, because there's so many gremlins to pick from in this movie.
I think the dead meat kill count counted like about 400.
Oh my god, that's amazing. Well, my favorite one-hit wonder gremlin is the gremlin that is wearing a shirt that has an image of Gizmo with a big red cross through it, a big red, like slashed out
There's
sign.
also a gremlin with an I Heart New York t-shirt, and he's also wearing like a sparkly fuzzy tiara.
Oh yeah.
I also like that one.
Gremlins 2. There's more than 2 gremlins in this.
That's it. That's the end.
Horrible joke to end on.
No, it's perfect.
It's Giving Camp, hosted by Saffron and Hefta-Gaub
and Fabiola Liaño.
Our theme music is written by Harrison Lurie.
And the podcast is edited by Fabiola Liaño.
Follow us on Patreon. Support us on Patreon.
On Instagram, it's Giving Camp Pod, and on Twitter, it's Giving Camp Pod without it's. We're on Patreon at It's Giving Camp Pod, and shout out to our patron Nicole Venito.